What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. I am your co-host Jackson Caudell, doing solo today. The lesser half of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast is going to be doing a solo pod today. RJ wasn't able to make it. Just a bit of a crazy game. Just a complete tale of two halves. There's a lot of things we're going to get to. Um, break it all down. Georgia Tech 7-0 for the first time since 1966. With everything that's happened so far this weekend, they're the favorite to make it to the ACC championship game, and I would almost say the favorite to win the ACC. I mean, they're is in as good a position as any with this win. They're 7-0. Let's break it all down. Before we do that, would just love it if you guys, if you haven't already, subscribed to the channel. Tell everybody you know about us. Would really appreciate that. Like the video, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Helps us out a ton. Really love seeing you guys' reactions and comments, questions, everything. We love interacting with you guys, especially after a good win like this. So I guess let's dive into it. So yeah, Georgia Tech 7-0, 27-18 win over Duke. That was just a bit uneven. So Georgia Tech gets the ball to start the game, and that you could tell that they were going to try to attack Duke through the air a little bit. Had Jordan Allen, 13-yard catch. They were going to go for it on fourth down. Duke jumps off sides. Looks like Georgia Tech's got a little bit of momentum here on the first drive. Ended up having to punt. And I'll take you back to what we said on Thursday, I think was when we did our preview. We knew Duke was going to get yards on Georgia Tech's defense. Just, with some of the injuries they got. And Duke is a really good offense. Like, just because an offense puts a lot up on you, doesn't automatically make you a terrible defense. We'll kind of discuss the run defense and some things like that were generally positive. But, Duke has a very good passing attack. They have a very good quarterback, a good set of skill guys, and a solid offensive line. And, that was, you saw it on the first drive. There was some bad missed tackling. I thought, especially Duke wasn't taking a ton of deep shots in this game. A lot of it that they were getting the ball out very quickly, and Georgia Tech was just missing tackles. That was kind of the whole thing. Duke gets down there all the way down to the goal line, and then just one of the crazier plays, the longest fumble return for a touchdown in Georgia Tech history. Darian Mensah keeps it on a read option, loses the ball. It kind of gets scrummed around in there and then pops free. Omar Daniels, the free safety, scoops it up 95 yards to the house. And that was just the theme of the game. We talked about Duke getting yards, but Georgia Tech had to get stops in the red zone. That was absolutely paramount. And stops can mean holding them to a field goal. It can mean getting turnovers. It can mean holding them on fourth down. The key was just not letting them score when they got in the red zone. And I would argue that's the biggest reason that they won today. Some of that you can obviously just Duke shooting themselves in the foot. I don't think Georgia Tech should get all the credit, but they deserve a lot of it. They hung tight in there. There was a couple. We'll get to it a little bit later, but you had several short yardage stops. Then they got to the fourth down, and then you had the penalty, set them back, and they had to kick a field goal. Get into that a little bit later, but so Georgia Tech jumps out to a 7-0 lead after the scoop and score. Obviously, you'll take that every time. The only real adverse effect is you're putting your defense right back out there. And after Duke drove the length of the field, that was definitely a tough position to be in, because that was an 11-play, 92-yard drive. That Duke was backed up, and they got all the way down there. But obviously the scoop and score, so they get the ball right back. Go 13 plays, 50 yards. Darian Mensah started 7 for 7 in this game. Cooper Barquet, he was dynamite in this game. 13 catches, 172 yards. They get down, get a fourth down conversion. Looks like they're going to score, but Georgia Tech comes up with some good stops, especially on third down. Duke attempts the field goal, and it's mishandled the snap. It was just a complete cluster. Duke was just, when they got in the red zone early in the first half, they were just making a lot of mistakes. Georgia Tech gets the ball back, a chance to go up 14-0, and they go 3 and out. The first two drives, they were not winning first and second down. They picked up a couple of first downs. You got Duke to jump off sides. Jordan Allen had that 13-yard catch on second or third and long. But the thing about those early couple of drives for Georgia Tech in the first half was they were staying behind the chains, and like that was one of the keys we talked about. Like they couldn't do that. Like I think Georgia Tech is a much better passing offense than they get credit for. I'm not saying they're a lead or anything, but like I think they're better than what they get credit for. At the same time, like they just don't want to live in third and long. Like what team does? Like there's no team in the country that wants to live in those situations. But Duke was getting Georgia Tech in those situations, stopping the run. Even Haynes King, who ended up with 100 yards on the ground, like they couldn't get anything going on the ground. So Georgia Tech has to punt. Duke goes out there for a third drive. Georgia Tech forces their first punt of the game. Jordan Vandenberg and Amontre Bradford teamed up for a big sack on Darian Mensah. Again, really good job by the defense. You can even go back all the way to the Colorado game. Like this defense was has been put in some adverse situations, and like I'm just so impressed by the way they respond. Like it's just a very resilient group. Like that, got the touchdown on the board early on, had a couple of big stops. Like it was they were really playing early well. Again, Georgia Tech in the first half offensively was just gross. And look, they got it going. To me, they were just very predictable. Like they couldn't get anything going in the run game. They have one of the most diverse run games in the country, but just nothing was working. And then the screen game wasn't working either. Like they just could not find anything going. Flip through my notebook here. Yeah, I still take notes on a piece of paper on like a notepad, like an old person. Like I'm old school like that. But Duke goes out there for the fourth drive. Darian Mensah, like there was a couple of crazy plays on Duke's fourth drive. Like it looked like Georgia Tech was going to bring him down in the backfield. He has a crazy scramble drill, finds a receiver down the field. There was also a tip ball. I think he was on fourth down, hits his receiver just right in the chest, bounces around, and kid made an incredible play. Like all the credit to him. Ended up scoring a touchdown. 11 play, 80-yard drive. Georgia Tech gets it. There's like 27 seconds left. They had a couple of nice plays. Haynes King had a nice run. Again, wasn't able to really. They were trying to get in field goal range or trying to just get in scoring range. Ended the first half. Like it was a quick first half, and like the main takeaway was just Duke's mistakes in the red zone and Georgia Tech's inability to take advantage of some key moments on offense. Like you had a chance to get them in a 14-0 hole a couple times and weren't able to do it. And your defense on those first three drives was pretty good at getting stops, and you weren't able to pay them back. So and like that was a point of worry because like Duke got the ball to start the second half, and they drive right down, had a really nice kick return, and then like I alluded to earlier, you had a goal line stand in there. Yeah, they didn't keep them off the board, but Duke got down there first, second, third, and goal. Georgia Tech's defensive line, like Brent Key gave them a lot of credit. We asked him about hey, like what made that happen? Like what made that goal line stand happen? He mentioned the defensive line just being very strong on the interior. Like that's a gimme, I think. And Jordan Vandenberg being a big part of that as well. Like he really praised him a lot in this game. I thought he played pretty well. Got the goal line stand. It ended up being a 15 play, only a 50-yard drive, and it took nearly 9 minutes off the clock. Like the game was kind of like flying by fast. Georgia Tech needing to do something, like anything on offense. First couple plays, they don't get anything. And then Haynes King finds Josh Beatham for a 49-yard catch. And, like, major shout-out to Josh Beatham. He had a big, I think, 31-yard catch or so last week against Virginia Tech on a fourth down. It was just he's made a couple of really critical plays. I thought he was going to score on it, to be honest. I thought he had a lane to get there. But it was just a huge, huge play. Had to call a timeout on third down, then nearly a disaster. Like Georgia Tech tried to throw the screen. Chandler Rivers, who's a really good corner for Duke, ended up breaking it up. And like that was what I was kind of hinting at earlier with sometimes Georgia Tech is just as good as Buster Faulkner is as a play caller. I think sometimes in certain situations they just get predictable. And like Duke was just teeing off on some of that stuff. Aiden Burr had to kick a field goal, tied the game. Georgia Tech's defense steps up on the next drive, forced a punt. And then, we were all of a sudden in the fourth quarter on Georgia Tech's sixth drive of the game. You had a pass interference on Duke. That was it ended up not mattering, but Haynes King did have Dean Patterson really deep down the field. for what would have been a touchdown and just overthrew him by a hair. And like that's been one of those things like on some deep balls and whatnot. Like Georgia Tech's been unable to connect. Like whether it was him, there's been some to Eric Rivers, and they just haven't been able to connect on them. So Isaiah Canyon made a monster 30-yard catch. Like it was a grown man catch. Like he just a heck of a play. JT Byrne had a 21-yard grab, get down to the goal line. They had a 3rd and goal. King he had a quick throw to Isaiah Canyon. I've watched like it's one of those tough calls. I personally thought it was a touchdown. I'm sure that's like a surprise to nobody, but I thought it was a touchdown. Ended up being ruled not a touchdown. Like they called it incomplete on the field. They upheld that. It ended up Aiden Burr ended up kicking a field goal. He was good again today. 12 play, 85-yard drive. Took a little more than 4 minutes off the clock for Georgia Tech, and then they forced their first 3-and-out of the game. Now it's 13-10. Then Georgia Tech goes on what kind of sealed the deal. 9-play, 72-yard drive, took about 5 minutes. Malachi Hosley hit a touchdown. I know Bailey Stockton, he had a big 3rd down conversion in there as well. Like it was one of those, you get. I think there was like maybe 9 minutes when the drive started, and you're like, all right, eat a bunch of clock, score a touchdown. Like I think everybody was saying that, and like the game's over. And look, it wasn't completely over, but the door was almost shut. Duke does get down the field. Georgia Tech let them get down there. Not super quick, but it wasn't like as long as you wanted it to, because when you're in that situation, like 2-score game, about 4-5 minutes left, like the one thing you don't want to do is give up a quick score. Like that's the last thing you can allow at that point if you're the Yellow Jackets. Get down there. Duke has to settle for a field goal, and it was a miss. It was wide right. I again, just a huge credit to Duke screwed up some special team situations, like the missed field goal and the botch snap. Like I was going to say, like give credit to Georgia Tech. Like again, the defense made like Jai Gilmore made a heck of a play. Like there were some just great plays. Tajay Butler had a really nice pass breakup. The secondary was far from perfect today without Amari, but the good thing is they didn't allow a ton of deep shots down the field. And like there were just some nice moments. Again, Jai Gilmore had a couple of really nice pass breakups in this game. I thought he played well. I know he's more of a nickel than an outside guy, but still. And then, like I said, Tajay Butler had a really nice pass breakup. Georgia Tech starts moving the ball. It looked like they're just trying to run out the clock, but then like Duke's defense, kind of was not doing as well stopping the run. Haynes King breaks a big run. Looks like it's going to end 27-10. Duke does go down and get kind of a garbage time touchdown. Gets the 2-point conversion on a heck of a play by their receiver. They had a couple of penalties on the onside kick attempt. I think it was an offsides and I think an illegal touching as well. Georgia Tech gets it, kneels it down, and like that was at 27-18. Offense was much better in the second half than it was in the first half. Defense was just, it came up big in the most critical moments. Like I'll go back to it again. We knew this was going to be a key to this game. Like I think it was pretty obvious for anybody that knows anything about these two teams. Like Duke's an explosive offense, a really good offense that's going to get a ton of yards. Georgia Tech is not a terrible defense, but bend but don't break. Like that was basically the assignment you were given. And Brent Key talked about it in the post game presser. Like situational football was just going to be paramount in this game. Like, yeah, you're going to give up some yards, but what do? You don't score points in the middle of the field, and they didn't allow any big plays to allow that to happen. When push came to shove, that they come up big when it mattered. Yes, I do think Duke shot themselves in the foot and just had a ton of opportunities to really take control of the game. The fumble at the beginning, the botched field goal attempt, like that's possibly 10 points right there. You had another missed field goal in a big situation. So, look, two things can be true. Duke really screwed up at the beginning of this game, and then Georgia Tech just kept battling. And look, Georgia Tech deserved to win in the end. Are they a perfect team? Far, far from it. But the matter of the fact is they are 7-0. And when I say perfect, I don't mean like obviously they have a perfect record, but like I think everybody knows what I mean. They have some flaws, but they fight back. Like they just any situation, like they don't flinch. Like, there was, when the offense couldn't get it going, when Duke is driving the ball down the field, defense bowed up when it had to, offense found a way to figure it out. And like that's always the encouraging thing with a great play caller like Buster Faulkner. Yes, some of the play calling was a little bit frustrating in the first half. I thought, again, they were a little bit predictable with some of the stuff they were doing, but at the end of the day, he adjusted. They made some big plays, and there were going to be some ways to attack them through the air. Look, they were like ranked 100 something in pass defense. Again, Beatham's big catch, Isaiah Canyon. They took some deep. Like there were some plays to be made, more than the ones that they already had through the air. And like Haynes King did a really good job. He finished 14 of 21 for 205 yards today. Carried it 14 times for 120 yards. Look, the run game was bottled up for a lot of this, especially until the fourth quarter. Like they just kind of let it loose. Ended up with 171 yards on 36 carries, 4.8 yards per carry. It's not great for one of the better running teams in the country, but they got it done when it mattered. Receiving today, Isaiah Canyon, 3 catches, 56 yards. Beatham had the 49-yard reception. JT Byrne getting involved in the action today. We talked about last week that the tight ends were really doing a good job of getting involved and making plays. That it's not on a high volume. Like more than likely, you're not gonna see like one of the tight ends for Georgia Tech have like 8 catches in a game or like just. But they make the plays, when they're drawn up for them, and that's exactly what they did today. For Duke, Darian Mensah, 32 of 44, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was in rhythm for most of this game. I thought Tech did a decent job at times, like affecting him, especially in the second half. Key mentioned that as well. Affecting them is not always getting a sack, although Georgia Tech did have 2 sacks on him today, 3 tackles for loss. They weren't bad in that department. But he started out in a good rhythm today. He's a really good quarterback. Like that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC, I think. And he looked at today. Major shout out to the run defense. We talked about it. Georgia Tech's run defense the past 2 weeks, especially, has been really tough. Obviously, you're not dealing with a dual threat like you've been the past couple of games, like Robbie Ashford for Wake Forest or Kyron Drones with Virginia Tech. But still, the Nate Shepard and that Duke running game had really been humming heading into this game. As a team, they finished with 32 carries for 68 yards and only averaged 2.1 yards per carry. Longest run of the day was 15 yards. Like they just didn't allow them to have any big opportunities really, and like that they deserve a lot of credit, especially since you're missing a Kilo Stone, one of your better defensive tackles. Like the run defense deserves a big shout out today. Total yards, Duke did outgain Georgia Tech 441 to 376. Again, the first half was even more egregious. Average yards per play, though, Georgia Tech 6.6, Duke 5.8, 14.6 average yards per completion, Duke 11.7. Again, Duke, a lot of Duke's stuff was quick game and then relying on Georgia Tech to miss tackles. And like Georgia Tech was compliant early in the game. Weren't perfect all the way through, but especially early in the game, they were really attacking the edges, getting the ball out quickly, and just keeping Mensah in a rhythm. And then they just screwed up when they crossed into the red zone. Time of possession was like skewed heavily towards Duke early. It ended up being a little bit closer than that. They ran 19 more plays on Georgia Tech, and still ended up with fewer yards per play. Like that happens, but like that it's. Georgia Tech's defense just did a really good job, fighting through. I'm sure they were probably fatigued a lot in the first half, but just in the big situations, getting it done, and coming up when it mattered. So, absolutely huge win. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It doesn't matter how a win comes and how it comes about. Like, yeah, you can. It's very fair to say that Duke shot themselves in the foot a lot. Like I think any person that watches football knows that. But you have to give credit for Georgia Tech bouncing back and really owning the game in parts of the second half. Like they came up big when it mattered, and at the end of the day, they're 7-0. I've probably repeated myself with phrases over and over again, but when you've been working all day, like that's what happens sometimes. So now Georgia Tech turns its attention to Syracuse, which, obviously Syracuse was the first team to beat Georgia Tech last year. They're actually playing tonight at home against Pitt. I think that's a bit of an upset spot for Pitt. If Pitt winds up rolling in that game, please forget I ever said anything. Now the landscape of the ACC has changed a little bit, as I'm sure most of you know. Um, Miami lost to Louisville last night, 24-21. Did not look good for almost all that game. Like Louisville really outplayed Miami. Like it wasn't a fluke win. So huge hat tip to Jeff Brom and that group. Like they pulled off a huge upset, and really now, depending on the result of this SMU Clemson game, if Clemson beats SMU, like Georgia Tech and Virginia control their own destiny to get to Charlotte. Georgia Tech is in a just slightly better position than Virginia, just for the fact is they've already played and beaten Duke. Virginia still has to play them, and that's going to be a really fun game with probably a high point total. Virginia plays Washington State tonight. Obviously, even if they lose that game, it's not going to matter as far as the ACC schedule goes. Georgia Tech finishes with Syracuse, with NC State, with Boston College, and Pitt. Again, Syracuse plays Pitt tonight. NC State's off this weekend. Boston College is an utter disaster. I mean, they lost by 2 scores at home to UConn. Not a good football team. Not a good football team at all. Look, that doesn't guarantee Georgia Tech will win. They got to go earn it, but that's a bad football team. The last game against Pitt could be very tricky, I think, but it's at home. Pitt's kind of found something with their new freshman quarterback. They've really looked good on offense. But you're talking about 4 games that Georgia Tech is going to be favored in. And Syracuse and Boston College, I guarantee you, will be double digits. I don't know if Pitt will be double digits. NC State might be double digits. It's on the road. Raleigh's a tough place to play. We'll see. NC State's like a worse version of Duke. Their offense is really good. C.J. Bailey, Hollywood Smothers, Terrell Anderson, the receiver, Justin Jolly, the tight end. But their defense is really bad. It's way worse than Duke's. So that's kind of what I mean when I say that. So again, Georgia Tech should take nothing for granted. They're guaranteed nothing, but they're in the best position of anybody not named Virginia in the ACC. And like I said, I think they're in a slightly better position than Virginia, just for the fact they've already beaten and taken care of Duke, who now has 1 loss. There's just a glut of teams with 1 loss in the conference. And again, at the time of this recording, Clemson is playing SMU. I don't have the score in front of me, so apologies if this ages poorly. But if Clemson ends up winning that game, you're going to have Miami, Louisville, SMU, Duke, Cal. I mean, they only have 1 loss in the conference. So a lot of things still to be sorted in ACC play. But Georgia Tech's right there. They could possibly be in the top 10 tomorrow if some things fall their way. I know LSU lost to Vanderbilt earlier today, so that's a team I think Georgia Tech is obviously going to jump. We'll kind of see how everything shakes out in the top 10, like where does Miami fall, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, just a good win for Georgia Tech. Far from perfect win, but they went on the road and beat Duke in a spot where they were an underdog. Like it got, I think, as high as 3.5, and Georgia got the win. So that'll do it for this show. Apologies if I missed anything. Like these instant reaction shows, like the game just ended a few hours ago. I'm still getting everything together. Just getting all the thoughts off the top of my head. We'll revisit anything, when we do our ACC power rankings and our playoff bubble watch next week. And appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm heading back to Atlanta tonight, so definitely a lot of work ahead. So would appreciate it if you guys would subscribe, like the video, follow us wherever you get your podcast. Huge shout out and Georgia Tech fans, huge shout out because like y'all were loud and it made your presence known. Like there was a good contingent of Georgia Tech fans at this game today. So shout out to anybody that was at the game. I definitely noticed you guys. So appreciate everybody, and I will see you guys next week.